Yokai Watch was a monster collection JRPG and anime where the protagonist befriends yokai, traditional Japanese spirits. The Ash Ketchum type was Nate Adams, the Pikachu was Jibanyan, the Pokédex or Digivice was the titular Yokai Watch, and the Pokéball type device was the Yokai Medals, which would let Nate summon his yokai pals. Since this channel is known for covering Monster Tamer franchises, every now and then I get comments about Yokai Watch. Until now, I've decided not to talk Yokai Watch, and that's because for a brief moment in time, I actually did work on the franchise. At least, I worked for Nintendo during the North American rollout of Yokai Watch. Generally, I try to keep my hobby YouTube channel separate from all that. Lately though, I've been enjoying the Kit and Krista YouTube channel. They're ex-Nintendo employees who've managed to strike a nice balance of sharing their work stories without coming across like they're spilling tea or leaking company secrets. Just interesting insights from people who were on the other side of the big franchises we love. So seeing them share their stories successfully, professionally, and considering it's been 10 years since I did work for Yokai Watch, I figured I would share my story. This is my experience briefly working on one of the big Monster Tamer franchises, Yokai Watch. So in 2015, I began working part-time as a brand ambassador for Nintendo of Canada. This was entirely different from the ambassador program for early adopters of the 3DS. This was a paid job for the Canadian branch of the company, Nintendo of Canada Limited. NOCL is more about marketing and PR than game development. It was my first real gig working in games. In the early days, my job had two responsibilities. The first was checking in on game stores in my area to make sure Nintendo products were presented correctly, that the game sections were tidy, that our signage wasn't mixed in with other companies, that our demo stations were functioning correctly. And the other part, the more fun part, was working events for fans and then press previews for games media and influencers. I would get these briefings that would say Nintendo of Canada is hosting a special sneak peek of this new Wii U or 3DS game on this date, on this location. Here are the details. We would do a training session for the new game, sometimes with staff from Nintendo Treehouse joining via video call to teach the Canadian team about the games, and then I'd go to the event space, spend a day or two on venue setup, then work the event, running guests through the demos, answering their questions, asking them questions to help Nintendo get a sense of what players were thinking. I would share these feedback reports with my bosses after every event, though I was never sure if the reports were going to Japan, America, or if my notes were just for the Canadian leadership specifically. Usually these press preview events and launch events were for Nintendo's own games. At that time, Triforce Heroes, Super Mario Maker, Splatoon. But Nintendo was the worldwide publisher of Level 5's Yokai Watch, and so, at least where I worked in Canada, Nintendo promoted it with the same care as a Nintendo-developed title. In fall 2016, for the launch of Yokai Watch 2, Bony Spirits and Fleshy Souls, we hosted a special preview event for media and for like influencer families. Picture mom blogs and family channels. We set up in this cool venue in downtown Toronto where we had 3DS stations with the new game. We had a Jibanyan mascot taking photos with guests. We screened the first episode of Yokai Watch Season 2 with the English dub and offered a sneak peek at the new Hasbro toy line. We would sometimes get exclusive event staff t-shirts, hats, or jackets to wear as uniforms, and this time my coworkers and I were given official Yokai watches to wear. I thought this was hilarious. As a Digimon fan who loved Digivice toys, I remember thinking this watch means very little to me, but to the next generation, this is their Digivice. I still have mine, but I don't have it in the video because it's in a box at my parents' house. From that event, I remember the player feedback being what I would call cautiously optimistic. Not negative. People seemed to like what they played, but I feel like there was some collective hallucination going on with Yokai Watch. I think my team was being told this will be the next Pokemon, and so we were telling players that, who were telling their kids and perhaps their audiences, but I don't know if anyone was truly believing it. I mean, it was true that Yokai Watch was doing extremely well in Japan. I remember our PR lead sharing the anecdote that a Yokai Watch movie had outperformed Star Wars The Force Awakens at the Japanese box office. There was this idea that the success Yokai Watch was seeing in Japan was going to hit the West in the same way. Yokai Watch had a slow start in Japan too, before blowing up, so this initial disinterest we were in the middle of in 2016 would surely be temporary. That was the feeling at the time, at least. I personally felt that while entertaining, the games didn't have the spark that Pokemon games had. The anime was silly and meandering, lacking the stakes of Pokemon or Digimon. The monster designs weren't as strong as past franchises, again in my opinion, and it didn't help that kids outside of Japan did not know what yokai were. We had a bit of a marketing challenge because if I remember correctly, we didn't want to call them ghosts. Nintendo was always very particular and adamant about our language and our game titles, and even though nobody in North America really knew what yokai were, that's what we had to call them. The other tough reality is that Pokemon Sun and Pokemon Moon would be releasing a month and a half after Yokai Watch 2 on the exact same system, the 3DS. Not only that, Digimon Adventure Tri had commenced in 2015 and was in the middle of airing. Digimon Stories Cyber Sleuth released in North America that same year, and on October 1st, 2016, literally one day after the Yokai Watch 2 launch in North America, Digimon Universe Appmon premiered in Japan. That is all to say, there was no shortage of reliable, quality monster taming content at this time, with Tri, Cyber Sleuth, and Sun and Moon appealing to older fans, while Appmon, as well as Sun and Moon, was also meant to appeal to young fans. There was a lot of fierce competition in the Japanese multimedia monster taming series space. Needless to say, outside of Japan, Yokai Watch was not the hit Nintendo and Level 5 thought it would be. A Yokai Watch 3 actually released in Japan before my Yokai Watch 2 event happened, but that game was not localized for North America until 2019, a year after I had moved on from Nintendo. That third game saw Nate move to the USA, and there's some speculation among fans and followers of the franchise that this was an attempt to help Yokai Watch grow outside of the Japanese territory, kind of like the World Tour arc of Digimon 02, but clearly that did not help the franchise take off. Yokai Watch 4 came to Nintendo Switch in 2019, but only in Japan, and it was never released internationally. In my experience being a fan and critic of things like Digimon and Metabots and Shaman King, these things are cyclical. Everything old becomes new again, so I wouldn't be surprised to see Yokai Watch get a second chance in a few years, maybe a reboot or return, but that's all speculation. So that's my connection to Yokai Watch. Outside of the launch event for the sequels that I mentioned, I do remember promoting the first game at some Nintendo events where we had multiple games to showcase, but the Yokai Watch 2 launch event was, from my perspective, Nintendo of Canada's biggest marketing push for Yokai Watch. It was a strange little game and a strange time with some serious competition. Again, Sun and Moon, Appmon, Cyber Sleuth. I think it's great that Yokai Watch appeared nearly 15 years after the Monster Tamer Gold Rush, but the staying power of Pokemon and the Digimon revival that was underway would have made it hard for any new franchise to break into the space. So that's my story. Let me know what you thought about Yokai Watch, what you thought about this video format, if you find stories like this interesting. I worked on a handful of product launches from 2015 through 2018 and have some fun stories about the Sun and Moon launch, the Breath of the Wild launch, just to name a few. Maybe I'll share those stories one day if you're interested. Thanks for watching. Glad I could finally discuss Yokai Watch on the channel, even if it was a different format. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.